Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my podcast, Let's Solve the Forensics, where obviously we talk about forensic science. My name is Dejanique, and on today's episode, we're going to get deeper into a topic about an assignment I did for my forensics class. Now, first thing to note is forensics is used in crime scenes all around the world. They focus on the evidence that is left behind at the scene. So for my assignment, we had to map out a concept map about physical evidence. During this map, we had a list of different types of evidence, such as a footprint, DNA, and dental records. We also had words such as trace evidence, impression evidence, and biological evidence, and Locard's exchange. At first, I did not know where to start with this long list of words. I had never heard of Locard's exchange, so I had to look it up. I found that Locard's exchange is that every contact will leave a trace behind, meaning that a criminal of a scene will leave their trace behind or take something from the scene. I then looked up the different types of evidence that could be left behind because at first I thought all evidence was just under one category. Once I found that trace evidence is evidence that is not seen to the naked eye, such as DNA, impression evidence is evidence that leaves an impression, such as a footprint, and biological evidence is biological substance or material, such as hair or fiber. Once I read more on the words, I was able to do the concept map, and it was very simple. Above is a picture of how I did my map. I placed Locard's exchange at the top and branched out to the different types of evidence, since they are included in that principle. Then I placed all the different types of evidence under the correct type, such as DNA to trace evidence, footprint to impression, and dental records to biological evidence, and so on until I finished the list of our evidence. I liked this learning module because it was very nice to learn more about evidence, especially when I thought it was all the same. Locard's exchange is used in most, if not all, criminal cases, but one of the most famous crimes that uses the different categories of evidence is based on a famous serial killer, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was a serial killer who was active between 1974 to 1978. He kidnapped, raped, and murdered young women. All throughout his trial, Bundy was in denial of all the charges, but you could say forensic science got the best of him. From the article named The Most Infamous Bite Mark Case from the University of Maryland School of Dentistry, in 1975, as Bundy was in Florida, he unleashed another murder spree. Bundy bit one of his victims named Lisa Lively on the buttock. Now, Bundy's teeth had a very unique lining, and the mold of his teeth matched the bite mark left on the victim's bottom. This is an example of impression evidence, since his bite left an impression on the victim. He was convicted of the murder of Lisa Lively in 1979 from this evidence. Another example with Ted Bundy and the use of forensic science with Locard's exchange was with his victim, Caryn Campbell. According to the article Caryn Campbell, Ted Bundy's 15th victim, from the website This Interests Me. Campbell was on a vacation trip with her fiancé in Colorado in 1975, where she went to her room and had gone missing since. Her fiancé reported her absence, but no one could find her until 5 weeks after her disappearance. Her body was found under 8 yards of snow, and she had been there for almost 40 days. Ted Bundy did not confess to this murder in 1989 before he was executed. But forensics strikes again. Hairs were found in his Volkswagen by the FBI and were microscopically similar to the hairs of Campbell. This is an example of trace evidence since they had to use a microscope to connect the hairs found in Bundy's car to the hairs on Campbell's head. Ted Bundy had plenty more crimes that uses forensic science, but these were the main ones that pointed out on Locard's exchange. Forensic science was able to help in the Ted Bundy case back in the 70s. But what about now? Well, forensic science has developed significantly since then and is used in today's current events. In a recent article published on July 19th, 2022, in the New York Times by Eduardo Medina, Forensic cracks the case again. In the article, Medina talks about a homicide case back in 1975, where a 19-year-old girl named Linda Sue Butchler was stabbed 19 times and killed in her apartment. For 46 years, the killer was not found, until now. David Sinopoli lived in the same apartment complex as she did. During February of this year, authorities were able to collect his DNA from a coffee mug he had used and thrown away. The DNA from the coffee mug had matched the DNA from the crime scene. Butchler was found with her pants unbuttoned and unzipped, and on her underwear was found semen that belonged to Mr. Sinopoli. DNA testing was used in this case, which is evidence that falls under trace evidence. The article mentioned how the sample of semen was submitted in 1997 and uploaded to the DNA database, but there was no matches in the database. The DNA is taken when criminals are arrested and their DNA is collected. But since Mr. Sinopoli was never arrested, his DNA was not into the system. This case shows that Locard's exchange is still used in today's world. It also shows that Locard's exchange is correct that a criminal will leave their trace behind and does take it with them, since it was Sinopoli's DNA that was found. Although this crime took 4 decades to solve, forensic science and Locard's exchange were the reason this crime and current event were able to be solved. I learned a lot from this current event, such as that even if it has been a long time, there is still a chance that the case may be solved. I also learned how Locard's exchange still works in today's world in order to solve them. I also learned how different types of evidence play a big role in the crime scene. I also learned from Ted Bundy's bite mark case that even a bite mark is super significant to a person and is unique to everyone. I had fun doing the assignment as well as doing this podcast because we were able to tie in our assignment with current events and famous crimes that had taken place in today's world. That's all we have to talk about in today's episode. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you were able to learn something as well. In the description below are the articles we have talked about today, so you are able to read more about them if you would like. I would also like if you would leave a comment and say what you found interesting about either Locard's exchange principle, the different types of evidence, or one of the crime cases or current events. Stay tuned, especially if you enjoy forensics or if you really like to learn about crime cases or current events. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode with me, and I hope to talk to you guys more with a different topic next time with a new episode of Let's Solve the Forensics. With me, your host, Deshanique. Have a great one, and thank you again. Goodbye.